Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'll show you how I made this sticker sheet for Halloween, and we're going through all of the artwork step by step how I did it. So I started off by sketching on my iPad. I don't usually sketch on my iPad, but at the time this is all I had with me. I was doing this at work on my break. So I sketched out on my iPad and then I printed off the sketch onto an A4 sheet of paper, and so now I'm using my light box to transfer the sketches just with pencil onto this Copic sketchbook. What I've been doing lately for all of my alcohol marker art is to start off by erasing some of the pencil sketch because I don't want any graphite to be smudged around, and then going over with colored pencil. And this pencil is usually the same color, or as close as I can get with the pencils I have, as the darkest shade that I plan to use. Not usually darker. I don't usually like really bold line art or anything for this kind of style. And we're just trying our best to match as best as possible. And then I'm working generally from light to dark. So for the first two little pieces of candy here, they are candy corn pumpkins, and they are from the same reference image, and they will use the same color palette. So I swatched all my colors and I made sure to use all the same colors in pretty much the same way so that they looked like they were the same kind of object. And yeah, it threw me off a little bit because they look pretty derpy, and I had to keep reminding myself they're candy corn pumpkins, so they do look derpy. You're making it accurate to the reference, so I had to trust the process. And I really liked bringing out, like, in photos, often if you're using photos as a reference, then if you're basically sticking so closely to the photo, often it can turn out pretty flat, unless it's like a really heavily edited photo. And so especially with alcohol markers, which tend to lay down darker and then they dry a lot later, once they're fully dry, it will look like sometimes even several shades later. It's really easy to not get enough depth, so I looked really closely, I zoomed in really far, and then zoomed out really far, and then zoomed in really far, and brought out basically shadows and shapes that maybe you wouldn't otherwise notice, but it makes it look a lot more interesting to the eye, and I think it shows a little bit more of the realism than if I were to just like color pick basically from the photo itself. And I do like the second one a lot more, just because I think especially the positioning is a little more interesting, and also the sort of like abnormal asymmetrical shapes seemed a lot more interesting to me, so I really liked how it turned out. For these ones in particular, I really wanted to capture like a super smooth texture that's just a little bit wonky. So I basically, every time I laid down a color, I really blended it out, and sometimes I layered quite a bit of ink before it dried on top of itself, so that it almost gave sort of like a watercolor effect to where they sort of bleed into each other. And I think it made it look really smooth, almost sort of waxy, which is what we want from candy corn pumpkins. So I think I achieved it in exactly the way I wanted to. I was a little worried about the stems at first because I wasn't sure. I was kind of using a mix of like sort of a sea foamy green color and then a more like yellowy green color. And I was like, these are like the best colors I have. Like, I was matching shade number one priority and then color second, but I think after going over it and blending it in together, and then especially after the pencil, I think it actually ended up looking pretty good, so I'm not mad about it. I'm not mad anymore. So we're heading on to the next one here. This is our first candy corn. It's not candy corn pumpkin, but the kernel of corn in candy form. And these ones were interesting. Whenever we do like something that has sections like this, it feels like I need to get 3 different color palettes. Like in the previous collection, the Fair Food set, the caramel apple had like it had a caramel section, it had an apple section, caramel section, and then the chocolate section, and I had to choose 3 different palettes. But what I chose to do for this at least was, the white is mostly white. I did go in with a little bit of gray and a mix of warm and cool gray to make sort of a neutral gray. I don't know, just fit best. And then I did use a lot of the same colors that I used in the candy corn pumpkins to keep it pretty cohesive. And then for the yellow, of course, I had to grab a whole bunch of new yellows, and my goal here was I didn't want to make it super vibrant in the shadows because I wanted it to look like you know, the waxy kind of candy corn. So I chose a pretty like muted, almost, actually I think I did use a gray yellow, and I really liked how it turned out. That's one of my favorite ones. And then this was done on stream, so I apologize if the quality is a little worse. I just can't stream in 4K. Not possible. So while the other videos were filmed in 4K, this one is a little less good quality. So less good. I'm an English teacher. I know English. Worse quality. So I did keep a lot of the same markers. So I actually had a little like bag, like a pouch, that I kept putting markers in and the color pencils in between drawing sessions, so that I kept it consistent and I kept referencing the other swatches that I made previously. This was really fun. Chat was interesting. We were talking about if we were to make a new Mount Rushmore of classic Halloween characters, who would be on our Halloween Mount Rushmore. So that was an interesting conversation to keep me going. And also the texture of this sort of aluminum inside wrapper. It was shiny, the outside's orange, the inside's silver. It's really interesting. And so drawing these candies, there's 2 different candies that are wrapped in plastic or aluminum or whatever. I don't actually know exactly what the wrappers consisted of, but these ones were an interesting challenge to do, like shiny surfaces but like with hard edges. So a lot of the shadows I didn't blend out nearly as much as with the candies before, because the ones before, like we said, were supposed to be like really waxy looking and super smooth, whereas these ones were supposed to be like smooth but like crinkly, so a lot of really hard edges. And so I just kept adding color after color. So I sort of expanded the palette that I used for the candy corn pumpkins, and I used the same yellows that I used for also the candy corn. And it, again, just kind of came together in the end, as they usually do. There's always like a stage, an ugly stage, right? Where we're like, oh no, what's happening? And then somehow it always comes together. Well, I can't say always, but often enough it comes together. So I was very pleased, and it was very satisfying to keep adding more and more contrast. Like the darker colors being added just sort of made it pop, you know, like with the, because it's like a foil, it's like a metal texture, so there's very bright sections that are basically white, and then there's some really dark sections that are basically black, and that's what I really loved seeing come together on this one. And I did throw in some reds as well, because this orange was more of like a red orange, so I got to throw in a couple Copics with red in them. And then someone was asking in chat about do I highlight with like I think they asked about oil pastels or something. So I was showing off which things I had in my kit, I guess, that I used to highlight, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll use this one. I don't use it often, but let me try it. And I was like, oh, that looks good. I did it over a swatch, and then I used it instead of my usual gel pen or my Holbein. And that was me showing this is what the inside is supposed to look like, because at first it looked plain white, but then I knew I wanted a lot of the little wrinkles to be really fine looking. So I went in with a colored pencil and I sharpened the heck out of it, And with the black colored pencil, I made a lot of those wrinkles, and now I think it looks like foil. So we're on to the next candy corn. Maybe I should have done these at the same time. Didn't even consider it. I just went in the order that I transferred things onto the sketchbook. So I had to go back and find the colors I was using, and for quite some time I was struggling to find exactly what colors I used, particularly for the white. Not for the white. Actually, the white I think I knew immediately. I didn't think I had to look that up. But for the yellow, that was hard. So I actually went back into my footage of when I did the first one. So I was like checking and like trying to read the numbers on the markers on the tips, and sometimes I can't see them properly. So pro tip, just swatch everything and label it before you start laying down colors, because there were some yellow colors that I didn't actually swatch. The oranges I knew, but the yellow I didn't. So it was a struggle. I was looking for a color that apparently I do not possess, because I was reading the number wrong, because it was so blurry when I zoomed in all the way. But it worked out in the end. I think it looks basically the same, though this one might have slightly more contrast, maybe just because it's a bit more textured, but I wanted to capture that texture of, like, I don't know, like the ridges. Do you see what I mean? Like towards the middle? I just thought it made it look so much more interesting. So much interest. But yeah, that really turned out, I think, and I was comparing it to the other one, making sure it looked, again, cohesive, like they're the same kind of thing. And honestly, which one do I like more? I don't know, but I do really like this one. Then we were back to not streaming, and we went for the gummy worm. Good stuff. This one I had to blend, like the top part's orange, the bottom part's yellow, so I went in with the lightest colors of each and blended them together, and then just started filling in darker spots. What I love about gummies is, again, it's really smooth, but it's like a long bleed, because like light sort of goes through the gelatin, and so it looks really interesting. So I tried my best to preserve some of the lightest spots, and I didn't really want to bring them back with colored pencil, because that would require a lot of blending with a colored pencil, so I'd prefer to blend with alcohol marker just because it's easier. So I did try my best to preserve some of the lightest bits, and then just make out the ridges with darker shades, and switching from the orange to the yellow to the orange to the yellow. And I think it looked really delicious by the end. I think it looked quite tasty. Very pleased with it, actually. I love me some gummy worms. Don't eat them often, but this was the vibe, right? It's a very orange, yellow, Halloween-y vibe. So I actually, when I host Halloween parties, I like to make little treats, like Halloween-themed treats. And I often will take a little like pudding cup or coffee jelly and then crush up some cookies to make it look like dirt, and I'll put in some gummy worms. So for me, gummy worms do definitely feel like a very Halloween party-esque treat. And then we're moving on to the hard candy. It was a thing. Had to keep it circular, but actually I tried my best to not let it be a perfect circle. In the reference image, it looks a lot more like a perfect circle, I think. But I liked the sort of, again, like sort of asymmetrical, wonky textures of like the candy corn pumpkins and the candy corn, and, you know, the ruffled up wrapper of the candy so far, that I didn't want anything to look too perfect or manufactured. So when I was doing my colored pencil over the sketch, I purposefully tried to make it not super perfect and like sort of make like the edges of one color stand out from the edges of another color, and it wasn't a perfect circle. In Procreate, I did make a perfect circle for my sketch, but I just think it looks a lot more interesting if I don't. And so this was a fun texture experience as well, where I went in with the lightest orange and then darker, but basically in lines, like chunks of rectangles, but that slightly curve around the circular shape. You know what I mean? Because the ridges in the candy are all like, it's like a record basically. If you ever look at an old record, I say old record, they've come back now, they're trendy now again. But if you ever look at a record, like a proper record, not, you know what I mean. The things that are like usually black and you put them on a record player. The grooves, that's the word. There's grooves and I wanted them to stand out. And what was interesting to me was how dark the black looked. So I wanted to make sure the black looked super dark so that any of the highlights also really stood out, and that was super fun to do. I think this one came out really cool as well. There's nothing in this set that I'm like, oh man, I wish it would have come out a little bit better. I think it all looks really good, especially when printed in a smaller scale and cleaned up, of course. I cleaned around the edges and stuff. So I think overall, like, it's the kind of thing where like I had a vision and I can't say it came exactly like true to my vision because I didn't like super in detail imagine it, but it's better than I would have expected, I think. More interesting than I would have expected. So I'm very pleased. Pleased is a good word for how I feel about the artwork in this set. We're finally on to the last page now, so just a couple more things to go. This time we have the black colored wrapped candy. A little bit intimidating just because of how dark it is. And on the reference photo, it's hard to see like variations in color quite as much, but I wanted to make sure it was really interesting, so I added a bit more, I think, again, varying shades than what I saw in the reference photo. So a little bit more of the in-between shades between jet black and not quite white, but very light gray, though I do go in with white later. I will be honest, most of this gray you see is going to be covered up with like pure black, but I don't know, I didn't know what I was doing until the end. Like I was just sort of playing it by ear. So I was going again from light to dark and just like making it darker and darker and darker around the edges and the occlusions and things like that. So eventually a lot of it gets covered up, but that's all right. Again, I've said this before, but often I'll lay down a lot of the same colors even though I know they're going to be covered up with other colors, just to make it more cohesive. It's sort of like an underpainting kind of thing. With the jet black, I'm not sure if that's so noticeable, but it at least helped me get there. It helped me get from part A to part B, because it's very scary with things like alcohol markers where you cannot change it, like you can't layer. It's not opaque, so you can't put light on top of dark. It's hard to go really dark really quickly and not be scared, for me anyway. Similarly to the other wrapped candy, I think one of the most interesting things about doing this candy was the wrapper and the texture of the wrapper and all the folds and creases. And it was hard with this one because it was so dark, and I had to try my best to preserve a lot of the light spots. I did end up bringing some things back with I think a little bit of Holbein colored pencil, but also a gel pen, which, to be honest, I kind of regret using the gel pen as opposed to the paint pen, though I suppose the gel pen had a finer tip, so it helped me, do thinner lines, but the gel pen was really textured. It was kind of strange. So maybe I just need to, I have a new one already, maybe it's just a little old. But it looks okay, it's not noticeable in a smaller format. Then we're on to the lollipop, and I'll be honest, she might be the winner. I think she might be my favorite in the end, and I did not expect that. I was just like, we're doing candy, we gotta have a lollipop. I'm gonna find a lollipop that's Halloween colored. So I found some Halloween colored lollipops. And I just think after doing the hard candy, I already was sort of like in the swing of things. I knew what I wanted to do in terms of like the ridges and like the shading and where to put the highlights and how to go between each color. It just came together in a way that I really liked, and it was so much fun to play with the texture and like bring out a little and put in a little and like it just started looking like a real lollipop. So I was just ecstatic by the end of it. I think it was super fun, and it came out better than I anticipated. All of these came out better than I anticipated because I had my sights set very low. My expectations were like below the floor, right? We were just seeing what was going to happen and if I could actually make this set be a thing. Because, you know, I'm not used to drawing candy, but I like to try a little bit of everything. I like drawing animals. I like drawing fruit. So why not candy? So yeah, I actually, for this one, put a bunch of the oranges into a little baggie because I had, I think, too many to fit into that little pouch or something. And so I just threw them into the baggie so I could make sure I used the same oranges, though this lollipop's color was quite a bit darker than even, I think, the wrapped candy color, and certainly darker than the candy corn. So the lightest color didn't stay visible for very long. There are little bits of, you know, light orange. This, I think, is called pale orange, that I did leave, but they're very, very tiny pieces. So it did get a lot darker in the end, but I was excited to be able to use that Copic orange I have because it's just a really lovely, just delightful color, and I love any excuse to use it because it's like a nice orangey pumpkin-y color, my favorite. And then the black as well, the black bits. Again, same with the hard candy. The black looked really black minus where the highlights were, so it really stood out, but I wanted to make sure it had still, like, you could see the ridges. It was fun. It came out in the end. It just did. It did. I don't know. And this is the only black I have, so the most frustrating part of all of this when it comes to the black, both the candy and the lollipop, you know what I mean, the wrapped candy and the lollipop, was that this was one of the first alcohol markers I got a few years ago. It's not super, super old, but the paper I think I was using at first was like quite rough, and I tried to cover large areas, and so I think the nib got a little bit messed up. Like, it's a little bit crunchy. I don't know how to describe. You know, like when a paintbrush gets sort of frayed? It's a little bit frayed. That's the word. So it was hard to get into the small little details. So I did have to clean up a lot of things with the color pencil in the end. But honestly, for the orange parts, I used, was that Tuscan red, I think it was. And it kind of looks like a pinky red, actually. But it looks really good layered with the orange alcohol marker ink. And I did have to clean stuff up quite a bit. But it came out in the end, and look, these very, very satisfying. I did actually sharpen a little bit. This pencil was looking pretty bad, and it still looks pretty bad, but I did sharpen a little bit. And that's it! We did it! This is the whole set, and I think it looks so cute. Tasty, just delicious. And let me show you how I made a sticker sheet. So I put everything onto Silhouette Studio. I scanned and cleaned everything up in Procreate, and then I made the title in Fire Alpaca just with my own custom font and some strokes around the edge, orange and black. And then we printed it out onto some glossy, beautiful sticker paper. This is what she looks like. First try, colors look perfect to me. Gorgeous. And then we had to cut her out. I think Silhouette must have fixed something, because for ages I never knew if my silhouette was going to cut to the proper depth, if it would cut all the way through or not. But they must have fixed something with like the firmware or something, because look at it. It's pretty perfect. And here's the peel. Oh, so satisfying. And luckily this mat is not as sticky as it used to be, so I could very easily peel it up. I that bit was a little bit risky, but if you bend it, then it comes off a lot easier. And look at it! We're done. It's cute. I want to save these for myself, but I do sell them in my shop. They are live now. We love them. So cute. And then of course I had to take some product photos. So I cleared my desk and I posed them a little bit. Just with a little bit of, I have these like fake leaves. And I think it looks super cute. Here's a close-up. Cute, cute, cute. I love that lollipop. I just think it has so much depth. And that's it. Thanks everyone for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. I also do game streams and art streams on this channel and on my Twitch, which is the same, Emily Constantly Art. And you can also check out my Etsy if you want these or some other goodies. Also Emily Constantly Art on Etsy. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!